Happy August, Wondery listeners. You are listening to the new premium bonus episode, Sitting Down with Dr. Dan. I am here once again with our awesome audio engineer and dad, Phil.
What's up, everybody?
How's it going, Phil?
It's going great. Here we are in August already after a fantastic July of just some great discussions and amazing guests. And It's just, the month went by fast. You know, summer is winding down. School is coming. Fall is coming.
Mm-hmm. It's all coming. And also what keeps coming is everyone's wonderful questions. We so appreciate them. Everyone who submits to us, the DM on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Also, people email us at podcast@drdanpeters.com. And we love receiving your messages.
Yeah, we read all the emails, all the messages, and we're always getting some really great questions. And this month's show is no exception. And I think with that, why don't we go ahead and dive in? Because we do have some really, really fantastic questions, and I see some great discussion coming out of this. So let's just get into it. With question number 1. What is the best way for a parent with mental health struggles to not affect his or her children in the short and long term?
Mm-hmm. So just that this individual is asking the question is huge. Yes. Because as we know, a word that is foundational to our show is awareness. And so when we do have awareness about ourselves, any kind of awareness, that only increases the possibility of us being able to be aware of our thoughts, our feelings, and our behavior, as well as how they impact our kids. So that first step is just being aware. So obviously this listener is, and this is a really important question. We have to remember that humans are human, and there's a whole continuum of human behavior and human emotion. And when it ticks to a certain level of challenge, that's usually when we call it a mental health issue or some diagnosis. Right. And when there is that issue or diagnosis, it means that the challenge does cause some level of significant challenge or what we say impairment in our lives, whether it's our ability to do our day-to-day tasks, go to work, be a parent, at times take care of ourselves. So the number one thing that, besides being aware, that parents can do is seek help, seek treatment, address it. So there is no shame in mental health challenges. It's very common. It's very common, particularly these days. And again, we don't have to be perfect for our kids. Right. So if you have your medical provider, your licensed therapist, your licensed psychologist, or any of the other alternative fields of acupuncture, yoga, like any sort of guide, mentor, healing that you're doing, you are helping. You're helping the prevent some of the negative impacts that can come from mental health issues and how they play out. Now, the other thing is talking to your kids, depending on what age they are. We always want to find the balance of giving our kids enough information, but not too much information to cause them confusion, concern, anxiety. And so to say, hey, mommy or daddy is having a tough day, or I don't have a lot of energy today, or I might need to rest a little more today, or it's okay to talk to them in a way that they understand the reality that is happening with them and around them. Because I know sometimes parents want to shield our kids from some of the pain or some of the worry. Mm-hmm. However, if our kids say, hey, mom, dad, like, what's wrong? And we say nothing, but clearly something is, that can actually erode trust, and
Yeah.
the kids can be less secure and more anxious because they know something's up and it doesn't make sense to them.
Right. Right. And also in the at the same time, you're modeling this behavior of not sharing.
Mhm.
And, if we're talking about a long-term impact, this could become a learned behavior. And when our kids are struggling, as we all invariably will at some point in our lives, uh, they may be less apt to open up to you about it or open up to anyone else about it and go to that stock answer, oh, I'm fine, nothing's wrong.
Mhm. And yes, and this makes me also think of some substance abuse issues and addiction,
Mhm.
which can go hand in hand with the mental health issues at times. It's also, we're modeling for our kids. So if we are having challenges with substance abuse and addictions, and it changes our behavior and it impacts our behavior, it is like the best thing you can do again is address it and talk to your kids, particularly your older um, older middle school, high school kids,
Mhm.
about your struggle and what you're working on. Because if there's addiction in the family, as there is in many families, it is really important that your middle schoolers and high schoolers know about this, because they will have a higher likelihood of that addiction pull. And
Right.
again, addiction
Yeah.
is not, it's something that is very real, and some people's bodies can metabolize alcohol and substances at a different level than others, absorb it, tolerate it. And people who have that in their family need to know, especially the young folks who start to experiment.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then just to take it back to your comment in terms of, humanizing, right, mental health challenges, but also humanizing ourselves as parents, right? So, and of course, this is, when your children reach a certain age, like you said, middle school, high school, being sort of aware of where they are in terms of their, emotional intelligence can be sort of that guide. Your kids, right? So that'll be the
Hmm.
guide of to what level that you share. But one sharing is only going to build that bond of trust. Uh, it's going to, like you said, negate any. I mean, let's face it, there will be surely some anxiety. No child likes to see their parent struggling, but again, they are not creating the narrative themselves. You're giving them the information, and information does tend to lead to peace of mind. So again, I am 100% agreement that sharing, the appropriate level of information is going to go a long way, both in the
Hmm.
short term, yeah, and in the long term. And just to say that, it's okay,
Yeah.
our submitter of this question, it's okay. It's okay to struggle. And
Hmm.
uh, by sharing to whatever level you're comfortable sharing with your
Hmm.
kids, um, it's okay.
Yeah.
And it's going to make it, again, a team effort, right?
Hmm.
You're not putting it on their shoulders, but they will want to be involved in your life, and
Yes.
want to know what's going on in your
Yes.
life. And in turn, that'll come back to you in dividends when they need you.
Absolutely. And for all parents, for all issues, Phil, something you just said triggered this, which is when kids don't have an explanation for their reality, they make up their own. And most of the time, their explanation and narrative is worse than the actual reality, which
Yes.
is why
Yeah.
we want to
100%.
give them the reality, so they have something that they can think about and try to understand, instead of having to create these worst case scenarios.
Right. Absolutely. And then just another thought that occurred to me too, while you seek, therapy, counseling for yourself, uh, always a good idea to consider the same for your kids, right? So they
Absolutely.
can kind of have a
Absolutely.
guide through this as well.
Hmm. Hmm. and that being vulnerable with your child's or family therapist or counselor, which is, I'm struggling, and this is the impact it's having on me. This is the impact it's having on the family, and I'd like my child to have some support with this. That is as healthy as it gets.
Absolutely. And you'll find too that it will take some of that sense of burden off of your shoulders, like you're carrying the weight of the world,
Yeah.
knowing that your child is with a good counselor that knows what's going on will take some of that pressure off of yourself so you can also focus on your healing journey, because at the end of the day, you need to be healthy for your kids.
Yeah.
Great question. Great question. Okay. Question number 2. How do I talk to my teen kids about birth control?
So you talk to them. Okay. So let's take a step back. So this great, because we do need to talk to them about this, particularly with what's going on in our world or our country with Roe v. Wade. So the first thing is we need to be able to talk to them about sexual intimacy and different types of sexual intimacy and what they're likely to experience and feelings that they're likely to have that might be confusing or might be not confusing, that what they're going to be hearing, particularly in middle school, of types of sexual acts and different ways that people engage sexually, because we have a very experimenting culture that happens at younger ages, which is interesting. Actually, the research is also showing at the same time, teenagers are also waiting longer and longer for their first experience. So we're seeing both parts of the bell curve. We're at a spike in young experimentation, and also people through education and conversation and their own values waiting longer as well. So we have to start with that in terms of the background of why we would even be talking about birth control.
Right. Yeah.
And ideally, again, everyone's family is different. We're trying to do this in a non-shaming way, in a human biological instinct way. Like, we all have a drive, and we all have hormones, and there are going to be situations where there's going to be temptations, and some of them we want to emphasize consensual experiences, and when they don't feel comfortable, to remove themselves from a situation. In a couple of recent episodes, our guests have highlighted the importance of course, we always talk about how to talk to our daughters, but how also important it is to talk to our sons.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the other side of it. And then you talk about the different types of birth control. And what I've appreciated in our family, my wife being a nurse, which I know runs in your family as well, Phil. It's really been helpful, the explanation, when I hear her talking to the kids, or have in the past, about it in a very neutral, biological, I mean, not sterile way, but sort of like, this is being human, and these are the aids that we have to be able to make good choices. And there are pros and cons to all the different types of contraception and birth control, as they affect your hormones, different ways that they are, that you either ingest them or they're implanted in your body. And it's just really about sex ed, or, as we used to call it, sex ed. There's got to be a better name for it right now.
What do they call it?
Health education.
I think it's life and family education. LFE, I believe it is. Or
much
FLE,
better.
Family life education. That's it.
Much better. Just dated myself there.
Yeah, and as my impression is, the school curriculum is pretty solid in terms of the information that they deliver. But of course, and even the schools state this is no substitute to having these conversations at home. And I think the key word right there is conversations. You're not lecturing your children on birth control. If that idea is anywhere in your head, it's not lecture, it's a conversation. They should be encouraged to ask questions. And then that will kind of normalize that conversation. If they feel like they are a participant, one, they're more likely to be engaged and listen to the information that you're sharing with them. And then
Mm-hmm.
also, it'll generate a certain level of comfort and trust as well. So when a time comes when they do choose to begin to experiment, you're more likely to have, you might not know all the details, but you'll have at least some idea of what's going on
Mm-hmm.
in your child's life.
We had a show on this topic or related topic, I don't know, 1 or 2 years ago now.
Hmm.
And what really struck with me is how the conversation about love and relationship, they said it's basically never too early. It's never too early to start that conversation because
Hmm.
that's the conversation that hopefully builds the foundation for talking about sexual
Right.
intimacy and
Yeah.
then contraception. But
Right.
it's all based in relationship. And for our kids
Yes.
early
Yeah.
on for us to have conversations with them about, what's a good friend and how, what do you do when you start to have feelings towards other people and how should we treat other people and how can
Yeah.
we respect other people. So I thought it's really interesting of this long view approach.
Yeah. I like that. I like that long view approach. And again, because you're setting that foundation, and you're
Hmm.
kind of incrementally building that comfort talking about
Hmm.
those subjects. And again, as I mentioned earlier with the other topic, it will really pay back in dividends when you build that trust on in these areas that are, traditionally seen as less comfortable to talk about with your parents. Is it ever going to be 100% comfortable for your kids to talk to you about this stuff? Probably not. Are you ever going to be 100% comfortable talking to your kids about this stuff? Probably not. But then even in that, you're sharing that experience as well. And it's okay to kind of sit in that discomfort together and treat them as they mature, as is appropriate for their level of
Yes.
maturity.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think, as a father of two, teenage daughters, of course, we've had some of these conversations already.
Hmm.
Yeah, as they are kind of, my oldest is getting toward her, mid to older teenage years, and so it's becoming more of a topic that we find to be important to make
Hmm.
sure that we have an open dialogue, and it doesn't just have to be a single conversation. You may find that there are conversational cues, throughout your time with your kids,
Hmm.
and take those opportunities. Really listen to your kids and what they are asking you, or even just having casual conversation about. Because again, if it comes up casually, and my wife, the girl's stepmom, is very good about this, taking a casual conversation hook and building in some very like valuable
Hmm.
information in a way that you don't even realize you're really having a conversation about something bigger. But
Totally.
it's
Totally.
it's impactful. Okay, we are moving right along here with question number 3. This is another great question. It is there a right or wrong way to tell our children, various ages, about our impending divorce?
So part of me wants to say no because there's things aren't black and white, but the other part of me, clinician wise and experience wise, is yeah.
Yeah.
there really is, in terms of, to the degree that you have control over it. So I want to say the caveat is, well, we're going to talk about the ideal circumstances, and we know that
Yeah.
not everyone has ideal circumstances. And what I mean by that is, an ideal circumstance, the right way is a joint conversation with a shared narrative with from both parents to child or children. Sometimes that's done on a one-to-one child basis. Sometimes it's done on a family basis. It's really you knowing your kids and you knowing the
Yeah.
dynamics and the
Yeah.
ages. So ideally, it's a shared narrative and shared conversation. And I know, again, that's not always possible in some scenarios. The other thing to always remember is, regardless of how well you do it, and regardless of how old a child is, most of the time they will still feel in some way, consciously or unconsciously, that it was their fault and there was something they could have done different. And with the exception of very high conflict relationship situations that are really difficult for the kids, um, kids are often wanting their parents to get back together, even as they get older. Again, with the
Mhm.
exception of really awful where they're like, okay, I'm glad this thing is separating. So ideally, it's together. Ideally, you are emphasizing how much you both love your kids, will always be there for them, and that this has nothing to do with them. And
Yeah.
you're probably going to have to repeat those things over and over and over. The other things to think about, particularly, you have to think about your kids' age. The
Yes.
younger
Mhm.
the kids are, and actually young, even to like middle school ish, the kids really need to know what it looks like. You want to make it less abstract.
Right.
We are both still going to see you all the time. We're going to have a schedule. You are going to know where you're going to be. So and so is going to pick you up on these days. You're going to spend time with this person on these days. We can talk about how we want to spend these days. Again, it depends on your situation, but you want to give really concrete security, because what happens is sometimes parents start to talk about their own process, which is important at at the right time and with, again, the right kid at the right age. However, a lot of times it just comes down to safety and security. Who's going to
Yeah.
take care of me? Where am I going
Yeah.
to live? How is my life going to change?
Yeah. Absolutely. As you know, I've got some experience with this, and
Hmm.
you don't want to have any guesswork
Hmm.
throughout, post divorce, right? I mean, from the divorce through the post divorce, I mean, divorce is not a single moment in time. Divorce is a state, right? That you are,
Hmm.
once you are divorced, you are divorced. And, those initial conversations are very important. And I don't need to restate all the fantastic points that you brought up in terms of setting the expectations, making sure they know they are loved, making sure they know that they are in no way responsible, and that divorce is something that happens between adults and because of adult relationships and adult feelings.
Hmm.
That So that's all extremely important. And then how you, like, talk about the other party in the
Yes.
divorce is going to be very important as well.
Hmm.
You don't want to make any comments that are going to make your children feel like they have to, decide or pick a side. There's a term
Hmm.
called loyalty conflict, which can be very, very damaging for a child, and can really, really lead to a lot of problems with anxiety, and depression, if they are feeling like they have to figure out what parent they are loyal to.
Hmm.
And it doesn't mean that, it's you bashing your soon to be ex or saying negative things about them, but even small comments, depending on the age, kids are going to, again, take the information that's presented to them, and they are going to draw, their own conclusions, or they're going to struggle with those
Hmm.
conclusions. Even a
Hmm.
comment saying that your father is leaving, then they're going to start saying, okay, well, why is he leaving? Did mom do something wrong? Did he do something wrong? Is there something else going on? So again,
Hmm.
the language you use, you're going to have to be very careful about
Hmm.
how you talk about just your soon to be ex, is how I will phrase that. Because again, it's easy, especially in a more contentious divorce, to have those emotions, right
Hmm.
at the top of the surface.
Hmm.
And it's a challenge to have that filter,
Hmm.
especially, if something happens in the moment, to be able to be as neutral, in
Right.
regards to the other party. You don't have
Right.
to. And then on the
Right.
other side of it too, if it is a high conflict
Hmm.
divorce, you want to be careful about creating a fantasy that you and your ex are going to be great friends and you're going to be friends and have a friendship.
Yeah.
Because in most cases, in my experience and what I've seen with some of my peers, that those great post-divorce friendships really are more of a rarity. They're a very fantastic, special thing, but they seem to be more of a rarity. So I'm not saying that you have to say we're not going to be friends with your ex, but don't use that as a cushion for that sort of the pain of divorce.
And particularly, this is particularly for high conflict divorce.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
So the research has been clear for decades that child adjustment is not based on divorce or not divorce. It's based on the conflict of the parental relationship, whether together or apart.
Right. Yes.
Right. So, because a lot of people really, understandably are concerned about breaking up a marriage because of the impact it has on the kids. And what we're really talking about is relationship and how kind and respectful versus how nasty and disrespectful it is in terms of the impact on the kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing I want to add to what you're saying, Phil, is what gets dicey, and this is why at the beginning I didn't want to say yes or no. This is not black and white. As your kids are older, and particularly kids, even younger kids who are really bright and astute and intuitive, when the narrative doesn't match the reality, that also causes problems. And so this is more, I'm just putting this out there, not of like, here's what you do, putting this out there as here is a dilemma. When the reason for the divorce is due to someone's behavior or someone having an affair, and then the narrative is not to throw that parent under the bus and try to have, and not have kids have to think something that they're not ready to be thinking about a parent or truly comprehending. Right. And over time, as the kids again get older, things don't add up to them. And you're saying, and you're protecting the spouse that maybe, again, engaged in a behavior, and things are not, again, black and white. So I'm not just like, things are complex.
Yes.
But it then gets challenging when your kid is seeking truth. And again, ideally, when your kid is seeking truth, which is different than the original narrative, which you put together for their age and their health, ideally, again, best case scenario, you're talking to the spouse and you're coordinating together about a way that this can be reconciled with respect and with both parties involved, because sometimes the spouse who then is in question or behaviors in question might say, you know what, I'm going to have this conversation. But this is really complex.
Yeah, it is. You're going to have to really be adaptable because the state of a divorce can change. It's going to start off amicable and become high conflict, and it can start off high conflict and ease out. So it's again, just be kind to yourself, right? And be kind to your ex. That you may not want to be, but that's gonna help you just avoid some of these common pitfalls that do end up leading toward anxiety for your kids.
Yeah,
we could do a whole hour on this topic.
Yes.
Okay. Question number 4, our fourth and final question. Dr. Dan, I do not want my in-laws to babysit our young children. They are in their 80s and not competent. Help, with an exclamation point.
Okay. Well, you got to trust your parental instincts.
Yes.
Ideally, your spouse is on board with you, so you can have a united front and a united strategy. This gets more dicey if your spouse or wants his or her parents to to watch the kids, so you guys can go away or them have time with their grandkids. So I think there's a couple ways of doing this. One is to be strategic and be dodge it. And you're finding ways to not leave them alone or to have reasons that they're not going to be left alone, and you have them more frustrated with it, but without them knowing exactly why.
Right.
And then there is the harder in some ways and easier in other ways of just standing in your integrity and knowing and basically trying to have the conversation, which is I just don't feel comfortable leaving my kids. And that one you can do two ways. One is you can blame yourself as an out for them, so you're not calling them out on their lack of ability.
Yes.
Hey, this is my own thing. I just don't feel comfortable. I'm going to work my way up to it, but right now I don't.
Exactly. Right.
Or you just have to say, we just don't feel comfortable because of A, B, and C. And again, I know that's dicey depending on who the parents are, their awareness of their areas of functioning or lack thereof.
Right.
But you got to trust yourself.
100% that, you are your children's parents, and go with that gut instinct. And your gut is saying that you're not comfortable leaving them with your in-laws.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is the most important part of this equation. You know what you are not comfortable with.
Right.
And they will, no matter how you deliver that information, they'll have to respect that. They should respect that, being that they were parents and that you are the parents to their grandchildren. They should hopefully try and respect that. But as Dr. Dan said, know your audience.
Yeah.
He gave a couple great routes you could go. I love this is on me. I'm just, I'm not comfortable right now, but I'm working on it. Right.
Yeah.
So then it's not absolutely, this will never happen, and it may never happen, but it softens the blow a little bit and leaves it a little bit more open-ended in terms of their feelings on it.
And I was just thinking, I'm like smiling to myself. I'm just thinking of the counter question for next show, which is the spouse or partner emails in, hey, I'm wanting to have my kids be with my parents, and my spouse or partner doesn't feel good about it and is anxious, and I want my parents and my kids to have this connection. What should I do? Right? Like there's so many sides to these things that we're talking about, you guys. So it's easy when we only have one angle, right? We only can just take one angle.
Yeah.
But everything is so layered.
It's so layered. That's life. Yeah. That's parenting. That's being human. So many layers.
Yes.
Well, on that note, Dr.
we got
Dan,
through it.
That brings us to the end.
Yeah. Always so fun, so quick. And this is our opportunity to engage with our amazing community. So thank you all. Thank you all for listening to our regular show every Thursday, Parent Footprint with Dr. Dan. And we love this format, the Sitting Down with Dr. Dan. Phil and I, and Laura and I, our producer, we look forward to these every month.
We do.
Being able to, a wish is we have someone live feed in one day, right? Where we actually can engage. We just love that engagement. So keep sending them, everyone. Keep listening. Thanks for all your 5-star reviews and being a part of our amazing community. Do your best to be that person you want your child to become, and ask yourself the guiding question I ask myself each day: what footprint do you want to leave? This has been a Peters and Rossi production. Parent Footprint with Dr. Dan is produced by Laura Rossi. Our engineer is Phil Rossi. Theme music is Mountain Spring High, composed and performed by Gabriel Lewis. Artwork is by Garrett Ross. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Parent Footprint Podcast, and on Twitter at Dr. Dan Peters. For more information, go to exactlyrightmedia.com.